ordered to the U.S. military halting travel and movement abroad for up to 60 days in an effort to limit the spread of COVID-19 throughout the ranks of the Pentagon. Once you've opened Pandora's box, you can't put it back. Another headline. This should be very deeply considered. Agendas being carried out doesn't mean the unfolding catastrophe is not real. It simply means it's being used to carry out agendas. We must look at the whole complexity of the picture. Here's the headline. Department of Justice wants to suspend constitutional rights during coronavirus emergency. That's what this government's about. That's what previous governments have been leading up to. Now it's worse than ever. From this report, the Trump administration Department of Justice has asked Congress to craft legislation allowing chief judges to indefinitely hold people without trial and suspend other constitutionally protected rights during the COVID-19 and other emergencies. What other emergencies? The ones that are coming with the next pandemic release? As I covered earlier in this broadcast, this is no different than the, quote, Patriot Act. This is much worse, actually, but the Patriot Act that was already crafted before 9/11 even happened. Part of that agenda. Does that mean 9/11 didn't happen? Does that mean the buildings didn't collapse? Does that mean Americans didn't die? Of course not. What it means is those in power don't hesitate to kill or create havoc anytime they need to carry out whatever agendas or objectives they want to carry out. More from Reuters and other sources. As coronavirus spreads, U.S. military to withhold some infection data. Secrecy. Just like the Chinese government, secrecy. Reuters has reported that thousands of U.S. military personnel are in quarantine or in self-isolation in Europe and the Middle East. There has been a sharp increase in coronavirus cases among troops inside the United States, but the precise number worldwide has not been disclosed because commanders have declined to offer figures, including the U.S. military's Southern Command. Secrecy, no different than the Chinese government. Moving on, more headlines. This one on disaster capitalists. Again, those who capitalize off any and every cataclysm. This headline, the Kushner family could be getting very rich thanks to the COVID-19 virus. From that report, the Kushner family's ties to for-profit healthcare companies underscore the myriad of conflicts of interest that billionaire businessmen have, making them particularly unsuited to holding public office. Gee, who else can we put in that category? Does that question even warrant an answer? Let's try to weave much of this together. The vaccine, COVID-19 connections I listed earlier, the impact, the potential for making the whole scenario worse. Now consider this headline from Vaccine Impact News. Over $57 million paid by the U.S. government for vaccine injuries in 2020. Consider that our government is paying for the death and injury caused by Big Pharma. Report continues, as experimental coronavirus vaccine is fast-tracked. All of this is part of the same bigger picture, complex picture, but all part of the picture. Let's add this to the equation from commondreams.inc. Quote, this is a massive scandal. Trump FDA grants drug company exclusive claim on promising coronavirus drug. From that report, as healthcare providers across the U.S. desperately attempt to treat a rapidly growing number of patients with the coronavirus, a pharmaceutical company with ties to the Trump administration has been granted exclusive status for a drug it is developing to treat the illness, a potential windfall for the company that could help it generate huge profits at the cost of putting the medication out of reach for most Americans. Can you see how all this fits together? We're all sinking in a cesspool of murderous tyranny and corruption. The swamp hasn't been drained. It's being stocked full more than ever before. It's worse than ever before. And those who choose not to see that are truly ramming their heads into the sand. And we will all soon pay the cost. If we don't clear the lens through which we see the world, we all must do that. It takes effort. We all are subject to various biases from our upbringing, from our surroundings, from our social settings. We must clear the lens through which we see the world. Time is rapidly running out. Back to the U.S. government vaccine injury payouts. Big Pharma continues to create carnage and mortality with total legal immunity for any and all death and injury they cause. A state-sponsored criminal cartel known as the U.S. government continues to pay off the injured for Big Pharma. And once paid off, these victims are forced into silence. For any that are still trying to convince themselves that vaccines are safe, again, Google this, vaccine injury attorneys, or, quote, vaccine injury legal advice. And then ask yourself this question: if many weren't being injured by vaccines, why? Why are so many attorneys specializing in such cases? And, as I just covered a minute ago, why is the U.S. government paying out massive amounts in settlements to the vaccine injured? So even as the true origin of the COVID-19 bioweapon is still unknown, the Trump EPA is granting a monopoly on yet another vaccination. If one summons the courage to honestly investigate the entire vaccine scenario, the whole picture, who is making what, who's paying off who, and what may vaccinations have to do with the unfolding COVID-19 pandemic, making it worse than it already was. The picture that is painted by all available data is dark indeed, but we must face this picture. We must face this reality head on if we're to have any chance of changing course. An example I've given so many times in the past: if you're standing in the freeway during the middle of rush hour, are you better off facing traffic or turning your back to it? Does that question even need to be answered? The tyranny that's occurring behind the curtain, in the shadows, by those who run governments, not just our own, but governments all over the globe, must be exposed. The president constantly accuses China of being secretive, which is, of course, true. But the reality is that the U.S. government crime syndicate is just as secretive. Secret classified meetings on the COVID-19 bioweapon, which our government may have known about long before the Chinese, and which our government may have even had a hand in creating. And coincidentally, this COVID-19 bioweapon targeting specific populations around the globe. And let's not forget that we know that a country that we are not allowed to mention, Israel, has admitted that they have been experimenting with just such a coronavirus for 4 years, and thus just happen to be close to a vaccination. What a coincidence. Again, I state, those in power could not do what they do without the active or passive cooperation of a majority of the population. We have seen the enemy, and he is us. Consider this quote from an awakened member of the human society. Frank Zappa said this: "The illusion of freedom will continue as long as it's profitable to continue the illusion. At the point where the illusion becomes too expensive to maintain, they will just take down the scenery, they will pull back the curtains, they will move the tables and chairs out of the way, and you will see the brick wall at the back of the theater." We are at that point where reality can no longer be hidden. The former paradigm is over. It was just a paradigm of ideology, bias, and program blindness and delusion. Where do we go from here? Is there anything left worth fighting for? The answer to that question is a resounding yes. The fight for the greater good is now more important than ever before. The fight to expose and halt the insanity once and for all. The fight to salvage some part of the planet's remaining life support systems. The fight to save some part of the remaining web of life. The fight to provide some possibility for some part of the human race to continue on, hopefully with a higher level of understanding and benevolence. Unshakable solace exists in fully committing oneself to facing the gathering storm head on. Unshakable solace exists in fully committing oneself to this most epic battle for the greater good. It is not just the human race that is in the balance. It is literally life on Earth. Fully awakening the masses to truths that are not being told, to truths on which our collective futures literally depend, is the great imperative of our time. Fully awakening our military brothers and sisters and law enforcement is the most important of all. We are them and they are us. Only in standing together do we have any chance of changing course. Those that are already awake must march forward in the fight to sound the alarm with unyielding resolve, with unshakable determination. Sharing credible data from a credible source is key. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org to learn more about how you can help. Make your voice heard. We must make every day count in this critical effort to awaken the masses. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.
It's Tuesday, March 31, 2020.